Hello, heretics. Did you beep something in the background?
No.
Okay, sorry. Never mind. That was him. Hello, heretics and heathens. This is Lilith. I'm here with Renee, and we are Veritas Voices. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I know wherever you are, things with COVID are, well, stressful, but some places are opening up. Some should be, others should not. But hopefully, at least in the more scientifically oriented communities, things will be going well. So, yes, speaking of which, how are you holding up? Are you getting a bit bored, Renee? Because I gotta admit, sometimes I'm getting a bit bored.
Yeah, I am getting a bit bored. It's just really difficult. Normally I would have no problem staying home, but now that you are forced to stay home and now that you don't really have that regular schedule, or I don't have that regular schedule at least because I am study
Hmm.
law where I go to university every day, and I'm definitely missing that. And I also wanted to go out a little bit more, and yeah, there's a great many things which I miss. And but yeah, since we are kind of getting bored, we figured that we can entertain ourselves as well as our viewers and do another tweets from Batch believers. Those were always fun.
Absolutely. Thank you
So
to everyone who's followed that and who sent in tweets. My goodness. Oh, well, COVID has brought out the stupid and the crazy, I would say, although they seem to be getting distracted by other things too. They're not just tweeting stupid things about how COVID can't beat them because Jesus.
yeah,
I don't know. Is that a silver lining?
well, on one hand, on one hand, they are not openly proclaiming that they are invincible and that they can't die because God protects them. But on the other hand, that also makes room for a lot of other stupid, which we are going to cover shortly. So
Ah,
it's
yes. Oh, the things we do for you people, I swear. Well, in any event, sit down with a strong drink, get your face protecting oven gloves ready, and let's dive into all the joyous insanity that believers have brought us this month. So, I'm going to start off with Timothy Keller. As you may know, he's an apologist, and some of the things he says are pretty standard, wishy-washy Christian bogusness, but every once in a while he gives us a glimpse of exactly how horrific basic Christian doctrine is. And this is one such example. He says, unless you believe in hell, you will never know how much Jesus loves you.
yeah, it's not like it would be more loving to not create hell at all and you know not torture people. That's not
Yeah,
loving.
it's it's an interesting interpretation of love that involves the necessity to believe in eternal torture. And
Yeah,
not that it exists, but that it's somehow just. Are you kidding me?
yeah, yeah. It's I think in general Christians have a hard time with love in general because they have committed themselves to such a strange and fucked up version of love that they you can't really have an honest conversation with them about love because they don't know what love really is because their doctrine commits them to a false understanding of it.
You're not wrong. Um, it's it takes a lot of work to try and pretend that this is a legitimate version of love that's totally real and loving and in fact the gold standard of love. It it, it really screws up the ability to demand better for yourself in your relationships, which
Yeah.
is kind of important because we all deserve better than relationships where we are being saved from the person who's supposed to love us.
Yeah. That's not what we call love, that's what we call abuse. And
Yes.
if you encounter such a person, run, go away. It's not worth it. If that person is saving you from him or herself, if that person is protecting you from him or herself, if that person is manipulating you, using your actions or her or his physical superiority against you, or his or her power that he or she has against you, run.
Yeah, absolutely. Run for
And
your
God
life.
does, right?
Sorry?
It's okay. God, it's okay when God does it.
Oh, of course, because you see, he's so much more powerful than us, and the imbalance of power is therefore so much infinitely greater, and therefore the abuse so much more total that that somehow makes it good.
Yeah. Plus he's
Logic.
plus he's wholly perfect and we are totally screwed up. So if we're just that much worse than him and if he's such a great being, then obviously he has no choice but to punish us for who we are as the beings he created us to be. For being exactly the people that we are. For behaving according to our nature that he
That's a
gave us.
very interesting definition of perfection. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And very special. Special. Speaking of special, oh, we have a crazy. Many atheists have been looking at the work of this particular individual,
Yeah.
and the crazy is just, I don't even know how to describe it. How would you describe it?
Well, the person that we're talking about is obviously the transformed wife, and she's really out there. She is
Yeah.
something else, and she's not just very much into God's authority, but also into the authority of men given from God over women, and she's very much into authority and very much okay with God or her husband or whatever abusing their power and really putting people in their place.
It's not
And
abuse if the person with more power does it, because that's totally reasonable. So, do you want to take the first transformed wife tweet? Because
yeah, I do. And we are also continuing with hell here. Like, I hope you notice the theme. Um, that transformed wife says again here, we don't deserve to be happy. The only thing we deserve is hell and damnation. If you think you're going to find happiness, quote unquote, out there with someone else, you're sadly mistaken. Happiness comes from contentment and it's a choice. Does it come from circumstances or from others? Yeah.
this, folks, is what Stockholm Syndrome looks like.
Divine Stockholm Syndrome, as I like to call it.
Well, and the idea that we don't deserve to be happy. There was an interaction actually you had with someone who I rebutted and they were snarky. And then I looked at their handle, which was filth to faith, and I said, I just saw your handle and I realized what it said, and that is the saddest thing I've ever seen. Even you deserve better than that.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally, you have to think of yourself as filth. And she thinks that the only way to be happy is to think we don't deserve to be. Now, there is actually down in the bottom a tiny bit of a good thing here. Happiness comes from contentment and it's a choice. Circumstances can't always be what we want. We certainly can't always control them, but how we choose to deal with that and what we choose to focus on and our willingness to be content without necessarily having everything we want all the time, those are actually important points in adult development and in learning how to be happy in a real way. which would be fine if that was all she said. But of course, she doesn't. She comes in with this horrific, you know, oh, and by the way, you're scum.
Yeah. And to be fair, I would say that as far as people thinks deserving in general goes, I don't think that anyone really deserves anything. I think that you have to earn the stuff that you have, and you have to earn uh, what you work for. You have to work for everything. It's not like something should be handed to you. But on one hand, I don't think we deserve to be happy, as in we intrinsically deserve this, but we have to work towards it. We have to make our way to happiness, but at the same time, we also don't deserve torture. Like, there's nothing intrinsic in us that
See,
would in any way lead us to deserve anything.
yeah, I can see what you're saying. I'm going to disagree slightly, just in the sense of we don't deserve to be happy. Because have you ever heard this phrase, you teach people how to treat you?
Um, I think I might have come across it, but could you elaborate?
Of course. Basically, the idea is you interact with people and you accept certain behavior from them. And we all, have to have a reasonable expectations. Our friends are not psychic and they have other things in their life. We can't be, it's not reasonable to expect them to make us the focus of everything and to drop anything to do whatever we want. But at the same time, you also have to put standards in place for what you won't accept, that you won't accept toxic behavior, that you won't accept always being second, even when you need help from your friends. Basically, saying you can't expect the world to just hand you happiness on the platter is true, but saying we don't deserve it, and the implication being that you shouldn't stand up for yourself and your right to happiness,
Yeah,
that's the really horrific stuff. And again, it walks a line between something that, could, in the right time and the right hands, be a valuable life lesson and just being a horrifically abusive, narcissistic insanity. And unfortunately, I think we all know which side she falls in on.
what I would also say is I would say we do not deserve happiness as in it should be handed to us, but we do.
But saying it shouldn't be handed to us isn't the same as saying we don't deserve it at all. It just means we have to fight for it. We have
Yeah,
to
I
do the
would say
work.
we have to earn it and we have to work towards it. That's the way in which I would say that we deserve it. And as far as relationship goes, you definitely should surround yourself with people whom you appreciate, and you should expect certain behaviors from them as you have gotten to know them. And I sort of do expect when I, for instance, am sad or when I deal with some stuff, then in a way, when I see that a person is aware of this, then I do expect of particular individuals that they care about me. And that's not something that I would demand them of this. That's just something that I've experienced and that I have a reasonable expectation of based on past behavior. And
And it's part of friendship, and that's good
yeah,
because
and yeah,
that's a reasonable thing to want from friendship. But again, you can't demand that when it comes to this idea of being, considering yourself as deserving nothing and being worthless. Have to admit, this feeds into the second tweet we've decided to cover by her, which I think reveals how she sees the world in terms of authority even more. Because she asks, how come the doormat issue comes up when a young women are taught to be obedient to their husbands, but not when they're taught to obey God, their boss, or their government? It's a way to water it down to try and make it obsolete and dangerous. That's why.
yeah,
Now, the problem is it is obsolete and dangerous, and it's most dangerous in the hands of someone like her, because I have no interest in obeying God. I'm certainly not going to obey a husband. But even with governments, for example, or employers, the worst kind of thing you can do is give unquestioning, unthinking obedience and loyalty.
Yeah.
You can
I
work
mean,
within the structure because, we all have to have a
yeah.
system and work within it. But that doesn't mean you should just blindly do whatever you are told because I was given orders and I follow the orders and I orders.
And one thing which comes in hand with that, I had a lecture earlier about labor law. And one thing that we have talked about is that you don't have to, like, you do have to listen to a boss and do have to do what you say within certain agreeable limits, within certain reasonable limits. But if your boss orders you, hey, listen, the next 7 days a week, you will work 20 hours a day, then
Hmm.
you don't have to obey that at all. You can say, no, I won't do that. And you have no right to ask that of me because that goes against the law. It's like
Hmm.
such a command and such a level of obedience is simply null and void. Or
Absolutely.
if your boss were to ask you to wear a certain outfit at work that degrades you or humiliates you in front of your customers, say, you
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
work within the system, but you can also say no.
Hmm.
And that's all for me.
And that's the thing, the idea that it doesn't come up in these other scenarios, I think says a lot about her whole view of the world. That she thinks it's perfectly right and that everyone else thinks it's perfectly right to be an unthinking doormat to God and your boss and your government. Which is ironic, of course, because these are the people who are the first ones going, the government can't tell me what to do, even if it's a like quarantine order, because don't kill people.
Yeah.
This authoritarian view of the world is disturbing, and it's really genuinely what she wants and what many people I think with the transformed wife, it's more just that she's saying the quiet parts out loud.
Yeah. And what I'm really shocked by is that she sees the world in this way that it's actually a virtue to be a doormat and it's actually a virtue to be a robot and that it would be a virtue to just blindly listen to the government or the boss when that's what no one else but her thinks at all.
Well, and I have to disagree with you somewhat there because Christians are taught essentially to unthinkingly submit to at least religious authorities, if not government ones. It's necessary to be able to question the government if they run
Yeah.
afoul of your religious leaders, but in everything else, shut up and know your place.
But
Uh,
what I find her to be arguing here is that she thinks the rest of the world is just blindly listening to other authorities, and that's what everyone does. But we don't draw any lines there at all. But with husbands or with God, and that's where we draw the lines. When we would say no, we work within a system, and there are places where we draw the lines with government as well as with the boss, and we also draw the lines everywhere else. We don't
yeah,
have unquestioning authorities. Only
no.
you do.
And we've history has demonstrated over and over and over again that having unquestionable authorities is bad. It
Yeah.
doesn't end well. Yes, well, speaking of crazy women, why don't you take the next one, Renee?
Yeah, I will talk about Christian apologists. Unfortunately for us, we have more unreasonable Christian ladies and female Christians. The next one is none other than S.J. Thomason, who apparently doesn't get the affirming the consequence fallacy. She laid out an argument for us to consider. He said the following: if God exists, people would seek logic, higher meaning, love, oh, I'm sorry. If God exists, people would seek higher meaning, love, reason, logic, purpose, a heavenly destiny, and objective morality. premise 2, people seek all, and 3, therefore God exists. Now, first of all, I would heavily deny that people seek all these traits, but what I do want to focus on is that she's blatantly guilty of a fallacy known as affirming the consequent. And maybe if I...
Well, what she's doing, let's be clear, what she's doing is called Texas sharpshooting.
Yeah,
You shoot something at the broadside of a barn, you go to where you shot, and you paint a big old target around it and say, look, I got a bullseye.
What I would like to do is lay out a different argument, and then we can compare the structure of the argument with her. And I think with a different example, it will become immediately obvious what she has done. So
I find it already obvious, but go ahead. Let's have some fun with it.
Argument. If it is raining outside, then the seeds of my cabrio will be wet. The seeds of my cabrio are wet, therefore it has been raining outside. But that doesn't really follow, nor does it? It could be the case that some children were just playing a prank on me and they were just making the seeds of my cabrio wet because they hate me. It could be that...
Honestly, but hers is even more irrational than that, because the idea that if God exists, people would seek higher meaning, love, reason, logic. Where does she even get the idea for these things? Logic, for example. People want to say that the logical structure of the world is due to God, but logic is something we use to make sense of the world and to lever ourselves from ignorance to knowledge.
Well,
we say if A is true, then B is true, then C is true. God doesn't need to know if A and B are true to know if C is true. He's supposed to know everything. He has no use for logic.
Yeah. I would say that some of us do seek logic. Evidently, not all of us do.
Certainly not SJ. And a heavenly destiny. Well, that's dramatic.
Yeah, we don't seek that. Only she seeks that. And
I don't even think she does. She just wants someone to tell her the answer. It's a nice, easy answer. Just, you're really super duper important and just check the boxes and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Because that's how adults deal with reality. Really, it is.
Yeah.
I'm not being sarcastic at all.
Yeah.
I like what Jen with one N said. Bad premise is bad.
Yeah.
And I agree, Jen. Bad premise is bad.
Yeah. And I would heavily object to premise 2, but again, what my hang-up really was the structure of the argument. Maybe, like, it would be the same thing, like, if I push you off a cliff and then you are dead, therefore I pushed you off a cliff. But you could have died of cancer, you could have died of coronavirus. You being dead does not mean that
I could have had an Acme anvil land on my head because reasons. Inscrutable reasons. No, it's true. And you're right about the logical fallacy within the structure of the argument. So what we have here is an argument that is both false and invalid. The premises are absurd and the reasoning is bad. So good job, SJ. You are as wrong as it is possible to be. Well done. Bravo. Bravo. I'd even add incoherent, because I'm pretty sure her idea of a heavenly destiny is pretty unclear. Or about the fifis.
I would go so far as to say that SJ by now has reached the philosophical level of William Lane Craig. And trust me when I say that's not a compliment.
Oh, yeah, that's lovely, lovely stuff. Really. Okay. I think I'm gonna facepalm through my face. So I'm gonna move on to the next one.
Put on your
which is oh yeah, you're gonna need more oven gloves, people, because this one is about science.
Yeah, and we want to keep you alive.
Yeah. This is Jay. J83X, who, if you don't follow with his, picture of the Passion of the Christ face, he is constantly saying incredibly dumb things about Christianity and science, and it's really quite interesting. I want to see how many of you can figure out what exactly is so incredibly stupid about this statement. So just listen. Scientists. The universe will one day suffer a heat death. Christian. The Bible said that the universe will pass away and melt with fervent heat. World. Shut up, you God freak. Now, scowly face thinking. I just want to leave it with you. What is the problem? The implication he's making, I'm just give him a second, Renee, because the implication he's making is that God already told us what the scientists are telling us now. How many of you are getting it? Anyone with a passing interest in physics?
I think I get it, but I want to leave it to you.
Jay doesn't seem to know what heat death is.
He doesn't.
No. Heat death, Jay, is not things becoming hot. It's a total loss of heat or energy being so far dispersed that it basically approaches zero. They never actually get to 0 Kelvin, but it's going to be as cold as it is possible to be.
Yeah. The precise opposite of what the Bible says.
So, good job. I don't know what's sadder, the fact that he thinks the Bible predicted the end of the world right when it hasn't predicted anything else right, or that he genuinely doesn't know what heat death is. This is not what you think, dude. This is not even close to what you think. I don't know how to, we're talking about no heat. It's like Robert Frost's poem. Some say the world will end in fire, some in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to know that for destruction, ice is just as good and would suffice.
Yeah.
We're talking about two totally different things. And he's saying, see, they said fire. We said fire. We're right. Without realizing that they're talking about ice.
Except that they don't, and except that you think you have science supporting the Bible here, when in actuality science blatantly refutes the Bible, and the moment he finds that out, he's gonna say, well, science is unreliable anyways, and science just hates God, and yeah.
Yeah, well, that's always it. So we'll wait to see how long it takes him to figure out that science doesn't agree with him and then throw it under the bus again. I'm guessing the switch will be immediate once he realizes it, if he ever does, but I don't have much faith in his speed of uptake.
Yeah, and for anyone who has seen more of Jay's tweets, you would know that he doesn't understand anything about science. He posts weird pictures about what evolution in his crazy mind would predict, when in actuality what he thinks evolution says would blatantly refute evolution, and what he thinks evolution says is actually close to Pokemon.
Yes, it's the old, I don't understand evolution, so it's stupid and you're all liars. Logic. Logic, people. Logic.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of logic, actually, you mentioned William Lane Craig, but you also brought another Christian apologist, this time commenting on current events. Some churches, as you know, if you've been paying any attention in the last month, are very put out that they were not being labeled essential services, because people can get church over the TV, but they can't get dinner that way. So, but he wasn't very happy with that.
Yeah. The next person that we're gonna talk about would be Dr. Frank Turek. I think he has a PhD in apologetics, so a PhD in
Fairy
defense.
tales. Yeah.
Frank Turek is basically your poor man's William Lane Craig.
Fuck. Oh, burn.
Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, but still. Burn. Oh my God. Sorry, please continue.
1-0 for me. What he had to say was, churches, do you want to open? Question mark. Just put a Planned Parenthood sign out front. Then you'll be an essential business according to Democrat governors. Hashtag pro-life. Yeah.
Of course, this comes with the old pretense that abortion is baby killing, so that gives us moral superiority to anything you say, no matter what's going on, argument that they use, which is bullshit. It's not baby killing, and it doesn't absolve them of the responsibility to deal with the consequences of their actions and teachings. But speaking of that, the irony here, of course, is that labeling himself pro-life, he's in fact encouraging behavior that will lead to people dying.
Yeah. That's
Like,
what we call
literally dying.
Yeah.
Medical services are essential. We need medical services and healthcare, especially at this time. And yeah, that may include abortions, but that's not all that Planned Parenthood gives. They give all kinds of people need to have their birth control pills, get their diaphragms checked, pap smears, keep on top of their health in other ways, because the last thing we need is more people clogging the system with other stuff and then getting cross-infected with COVID.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter because he wants churches to be an essential service that remains open so that hundreds of people can get together in a small enclosed space for hours on end, cross-infect amongst each other, and then go home and go to Walmart and infect everybody else.
Yeah.
That's the pro-life position, really.
Yeah. To which I would say, over my dead body, Turek. That isn't gonna happen.
Unfortunately, it's going to be over a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah.
Idiot. Not you, obviously, him.
Yeah, I know.
But, of course, as I said, the whole idea that by calling abortion baby killing, they can just scream and claim moral superiority no matter what they're doing or saying is pretty typical of conservatives. Which brings us to, I think, the most revolting tweet, or a series of tweets, there's actually two here, that I've seen in a long time. And this is just disgusting. Several of you have seen this. It's Eve Keenan, who, in addition to being irrational and cruel, has to be one of the most vile people. Just SJ at least pretends to be nice until she stabs you in the back. Eve is just straight up vile from day one. And it's I don't even know how to describe how revolting it is. This is another abortion focus. So she says, there is nothing more foul, more unnatural than a mother stabbing her child, the greatest good in her life, in the heart, in order that she may be free to indulge her perverse passion for carnal gratification of the sort practiced by whores. It is shameful to be a slut. Sluts should be shamed. Slut shaming is a form of right action.
I tweeted about this earlier as well. I have a hard time believing that that there's a woman behind this account. And one thing which you should know about this account is that there's rumors that Eve Keenan actually may not be a woman, and that
might be Dean Esme.
Yeah, and that her credentials are just made up, that she doesn't have a PhD in philosophy, which I don't believe for a second she has, but yeah.
Yeah, we should, to be honest, we should be skeptical of anyone's claimed credentials over Twitter, but given the kind of vulgar, irrational nonsense that she spews, I am a little extra suspicious and skeptical. I'm
Yeah.
not unwilling to be convinced, but I am definitely skeptical. Uh, and like I said, we all should be. But Eve's account, whether it's Dean Esme or someone else, it's this is the kind of bullshit that women deal with all the time. We really do. This is the kind of stuff that is said to us, granted, usually by patriarchal figures, not just in the sense of being men, but in the sense of being pro patriarchy. That idea that, boys will be boys and they can go out and get laid all they want, but the minute that there's a woman who is going to make her own choices about her sex life and not lock herself away in a nunnery until she's the property of some good, upstanding man, then that somehow is this disgraceful thing.
Yeah.
And it's, we can laugh to a degree because it's absurd, and it is absurd, but it's also infuriating because this isn't new. This has been going on for a long time. And by trying to remove access to birth control and education about birth control, it's just one more way that they've tried to punish women for having sex with a pregnancy that is unplanned, and then tried to remove the option to terminate it. This isn't about even about reducing abortions, because evidence has shown repeatedly that sex education and easy access to birth control dramatically reduces abortions. You end up only with medically necessary ones or the occasional accident, but
Yeah.
far, far less if you take that route. Whereas when you defund Planned Parenthood, you end up with more abortions and more ignorance and more sexually transmitted diseases. But, at least whoever's behind Eve's account gets to sit on their high horse and call everyone a slut.
What I did want to say about abortion was typically what they say is as soon as a woman opens up her legs, then she has consented to being pregnant. But what I have asked fairly recently from pro-lifers was what if she did spread her legs, but she was using contraception, or
Mm-hmm.
like using a condom, she was using some form of contraception, but nevertheless she got pregnant. So she took, while having sex, active measures to not become pregnant, and implicitly suggested by using condoms, by using whatever contraception,
That she did not consent.
that she did not consent. Would the pro-lifer then say, well, okay, she has a right to her body, she did not consent to her body used by another person, now can she have an abortion? I
And
don't
that's
really get
that
answers to that.
well, of course not, because they want to keep their argument. The problem is, and I think women need to be careful when we say it's my body, it's my choice, they hear you calling the fetus your body. I found a way to phrase it that they find more difficult to argue with, which is that no one has the right to use my body without my permission. Not a man, not a fetus, no one.
Not any human, not any organism of any.
Absolutely. It is my body. You do not have the right to use it without my permission, and I do not give permission. But I also want to show you guys, I'm going to put up the picture here of a fetus at 5 weeks, which is what some of the laws being put in place to try and overturn Roe v. Wade in various states are protecting. They're protecting the fetus at 5 weeks. Like, this has no limbs. It has barely any neurons. Certainly, no one is experiencing anything. These neurons are not, there's no conscious center or anything of the sort. This unconscious thing that could, if everything goes well, possibly turn into a human person, but it certainly is not a person yet. This is what they want to have more rights than adult women over their own body.
But I do want to say it because I've heard it in the past that they would say, well, this is a potential person, and therefore, as a potential person, it should have the same rights as an actual person. But what I was is, I am potentially the future president of the United States, but that doesn't mean I should get nuclear codes.
Yeah, well, they could give every born American over the age of 35, is it? Because they could potentially become, legally. So yeah, absolutely, nuclear codes for everybody.
It's very unlikely, and a lot of things need to happen, but potentially you are the president of the United States, but we don't teach a potential president the same way we treat an actual president. So we shouldn't treat a potential person the same way we treat an actual person.
And either way,
and the woman is either
way, no one has the right to use my body without my permission. Yeah. And I wanted to put this picture up because, this is what they call a baby, a person, and it looks like a shrimp.
Yeah.
It's probably a great deal smaller than one, but anyway, I wanted to end with one that was sent to us by Leon. Maybe you could take this interesting list. It's almost like those signs they would hold outside while they're telling us all we're going to go to hell, except in Twitter list form.
Yeah. This tweet is from a person named Lloyd. I have taken a look at his profile. Before we recorded this, as I think other people have as well, he's 16 years old. He is the Christian, but he seems to promote Christian values, and he wants to control other people and has some rather controversial opinions. And he had this to say: any mess of Western culture, and then he goes down an entire list. So the list starts: abortion, a feminist, a socialist, a communist, a cultural Marxist, gun control, wars, welfare, video games, single mothers, transgenderism, pornography, mainstream media, collapse of patriarchy, open borders, illegal aliens, and casual sex. Those are the enemies of Western cultures, according to Lloyd.
Oh, God. If he really is a 16-year-old, that poor bastard has been incredibly brainwashed. I mean, just really. Someone has to be, because no 16-year-old comes to this position on their own. They're taught. I said a lot of stupid things as a kid that I overheard from my parents. Or from my aunts or uncles raving against minorities or something, or just maybe someone who was a minority who they had trouble with at work or something. That kind of thing, you end up parroting without having any comprehension of the issues behind it. And so there's, yeah. But I mean, this, oh God, he's not just anti-feminist and pro-life and pro-masculinity. He literally put no fap in his profile, which means he's committed to not touching himself, and he feels the need to tell all of us this.
Yeah.
Why do I don't need to know this. I don't need to know about a 16-year-old boy and his personal habits. That's creepy.
Well, maybe it's some kind of thing that he takes pride in, that he doesn't jerk it. But yeah, it's I don't know. Does he think it makes him more attractive to him? It makes me, or to me, it makes some sort of out of his mind. I don't think that
Well,
would
it's
that
yeah,
particular
it's again,
practice.
it's how 1984 used sex, repress it and use the energy to feed the party. But I have to say, literally everything he's listed here is either a product of or a trait of or something only seen in Western culture.
Yeah,
Communism, cultural Marxism, obviously failed ideas, but they were part of the progress out of the, feudal and imbalance of power and all of the rest of it, out of these more primitive ideas of authoritarianism. Were clearly weren't quite the right answer, but they were part of the move away from this older toxic societal concept. Like he's literally listing everything that defines Western culture: video games, transgender, well, except for pornography, which has been around since as long as people could draw anything,
yeah.
collapse of the patriarchy. These are defining characteristics of Western culture.
Well, I think that he wants to bring about a new Western culture that is informed by Judeo-Christian values, sort of
Which, of
maybe,
course, is a bullshit term Christians made up, just to be
yeah,
clear.
but even close to a Christian theocracy. I don't know what he wants, but I think that he does observe them, or I have a hard time believing that he could deny that he does observe these within the Western culture, but he probably believes that they will cause the downfall of the Western culture. So that's why he's against them.
It's kind of funny. I remember growing up as a Christian, we were sold this narrative that debauchery had been the downfall of Roman culture, that, the orgies and the drinking and generally being way too indulgent was what caused the downfall of Rome and this great society. And so, if people were becoming too lenient and particularly too promiscuous and drunk, that meant that it was a sign of the times and of cultural decline. The truth of the matter is, and this is actually, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, the author of it, I believe, lost his faith when he actually studied this, because the real thing that destroyed Rome was Christianity.
Oh boy. What a twist.
Yeah.
Didn't see that one coming.
So, uh, turns out you're basically trying to argue that the Dark Ages were the right way to go. And we should get back to not just Christianity, but hardcore Christian theocracy of the most pretentious, legalistic, judgmental kind you can possibly find.
Because that worked in the
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, the theocracy has worked so well in the Muslim world.
yeah.
Clearly, it'll be so much better with a Christian theocracy.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Islam is just a stupid false religion. But Christianity, that's the real deal. And with Christianity, it will totally work out because Jesus loves us.
Right, right. And he really doesn't want to have to torture you. So, don't fap and be be a good little slave, and he won't have to murder you. It's just so nice of him not to murder us horrifically, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, like with God and Jesus, and really the Father figure is the Son. But if we extend this to God, then I do certainly appreciate that God does murder us. I mean, that's really the sign of a loving Father. Um, I,
Absolutely.
like with my dad, I thank him every day that he doesn't cut me into 1,000 pieces and puts me in the oven and eats me.
Which, of
Because
course, he would have every right to do because he brought you into this world.
yeah,
So, he can take you out. That's a perfectly reasonable way to deal with
yeah,
things.
and him murdering me would not reflect poorly on him at all.
No, no, of course not. In fact, it would probably be for his glory. That's always an interesting turn of phrase in theology. God destroys people for his glory.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't think you know what you're saying there.
but
But Ugh.
And God gets to do it, but if you're a woman, no. No, you can't. Sorry, no.
Oh, no, of
No, no.
course not. No, no, no. You see, because women aren't people.
Wow.
Yeah, Christianity is to dumbs. Anyway, I think I'm gonna need a break for
Yeah.
this week from tweets by batshit believers, and they never disappoint. They never disappoint.
Yes.
So, thank you to those who sent in suggestions and ideas. Thank you to those who watch and listen and just leave any comments or suggestions in the comments below. Reach out to us on Twitter at Veritas Voices or at Phoenix_Lilith or at Renevelation. Support me on Patreon so I can get some good material together, some equipment for this, and we can maybe expand our show a little bit. But until then, until next week, when we cover headlines from hell again, please send us any suggestions you have for that. However, in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and reason bless.